first one I want to talk about, and it might not be top of news. We'll talk about the Colts in a second here. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is your friends in San Francisco, our friends in San Francisco, right now are running Trey Lance, the former 3rd overall pick of the 2021 draft. They're running him 3rd string behind Brock Purdy, the last pick of last year's draft. Sam Darnold, also a 3rd overall pick, but of the Jets in the 2018 draft and on his 3rd team. Not only was he the 3rd pick, Thomas, but he was traded up for a significant amount of investment from our friends in San Francisco. What do you do in that situation? Like, it's a sunk cost at this point, but that player's draft status hangs with them for a long time.
You talk about trading him to Minnesota. What else do you do? I'm joking, of course. By the way, let's see how smart you are. What hometown is he from in Minnesota?
I knew this already. Marshall, Minnesota, because the only reason I know this, Thomas, when I was a junior in college, we played Southwest Minnesota State, which is from Marshall. We played them at the Metrodome my junior year, 2006. That was the career high in catches I ever had in college, was at Metrodome. It was I played at the Metrodome twice. The first time I set my career high in catches. The second time I played at the Metrodome was the week after Adrian Peterson rushed for 297 yards. So those memories stick with you. You know, your football life, they stick with you. But yeah, he's a Marshall, Minnesota native. And I like the cut of your jib here with Minnesota, right? Because you look at them, Kirk Cousins is on the final year of his deal. You passed on Will Levis in the draft at 23, right? You took Jordan Addison, their internals must have said they didn't like Will Levis that much. For years, you passed on Pickett, you passed on Willis, Ritter last year. Kwesi's also passed on Levis. He also passed on the opportunity to move up and get any of those other quarterbacks. And so they don't really have a young guy on the roster with any sort of pedigree. Move into Lance here. I actually think so. People talk about, well, you can just wait for next year's draft. The Vikings have a win total in the betting markets of 8.5. They're not bad enough to have a top 5 pick. And so the draft pick you could spend right now for Trey Lance would be, I think, less than what it would take to trade up from, let's say they're picking 16th next year, picking 16th all the way to 2 or 1, which we've seen the price for that before. The Rams did it in 18 or 16. We've also seen, we also saw Cleveland do it, Cleveland trade with Philly for Wentz. Like those picks, that's an expensive move. You could pay a fraction of that price right now for a flyer on Trey Lance.
No question about it. Look, I was jibbing a little bit there. I think that's what you called it. I mean, my thought on it was exactly what you're talking about. What would be an ideal place for him to go? But here's another side of the story that I think needs to be discussed and for people to think about. You're a general manager and a head coach. You make a massive move on trading up for Trey Lance. There's so much banter around it back in the day, right? All the dialogue about it. This is a really, really interesting, big opportunity to discuss at so many levels. You don't believe there's a lot of discussion within that building amid the scouts, the assistant general manager, the head coach, the coordinators, all the supporters, all the dissenters. This becomes a churned topic. And look, I've been around it. When we've drafted 1st round or 2nd round players, I unfortunately never had a quarterback situation like this because we had Matt Ryan through the entire way. And what I've said to you many times, team builders are judged on their picking of their quarterbacks, right? They've done a hell of a job in San Francisco putting together a really good football team. And they have a quarterback situation. They did it with Garoppolo. There was a quote there recently. It's never easy to be a quarterback in a Kyle Shanahan system for a number of reasons, right? So here they are with this draft pick that everyone's wondering what's going to happen. And my point is, we did it with Rashid Hageman. We did it with Vic Beasley. We did it with Prey Jerry. It is nerve-wracking as the main team builder, i.e. John Lynch, to watch that happen. Mm-hmm. Remember, John and Kyle Shanahan are getting major lauding from their owner, Jed York, the CEO. Loves them. But this is something that will hang over their head, whether it's this year or next year. I will be really interested to see how it plays out and how much stress it puts on the organization that there's another quarterback situation that that might be a little uneasy there.
Yeah, in some ways, you look at it and you're like, what's the problem, right? You had Lance, you had Purdy, you hedged that bet there, then you hedged the bet with Darnold, and I think most people believe that whomever starts at quarterback for the Niners will play well because of that offense. And yet at the same time, then you're saying to yourself, well, then why did you feel like you had to invest so much into Lance specifically if the trope is that everybody can succeed in a Shanahan offense? That's not necessarily true, by the way. Like when Garoppolo, the Niners since 2015, Thomas, have either lost 10 or more games or they've made the NFC Championship game. That divergence. And the years that they've lost 10 or more games, it's because Garoppolo got hurt and the guys like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard and guys like that were not able to perform. Last year was the outlier where the guy that came in for the injured quarterback actually had some success. And so I think a lot of people over-index on, anybody can succeed in Shanahan's system. It's like, no, like Garoppolo's had success there, and Purdy in a small samples had success there. Other places, Hoyer had his best year, and RG3 had his best year. But even then, the success there, I think, is a little overblown. So I do think I do think taking a swing at an elite quarterback in the 2021 draft was not ill-advised. It's just it hasn't worked out yet. And, they bet on traits, right? Lance has only really played like 5 games since 2019. And when he was in college, he only had like 50 pass attempts when trailing, right? So we don't have a ton of data on Lance. And so they took a swing and, maybe it doesn't work. Here's a question for you before we go on to Jonathan Taylor. Like a similar situation in your career would have been, it's not completely perfect because you can play more than one wide receiver at a time. But if Julio Jones had struggled out of the gate, that would have, like, the question would have been like, what would you have done? Because you're fortunate that you picked the right player and he's a Hall of Famer. But you put yourself in their shoes and it's similar, right? You paid a hefty sum to move up to get Julio Jones, and if he doesn't succeed right away, like what do you do? Does the coach have to continue to trot him out there and hope that he kind of develops, or what? That's a good question.
Well, look, ballsy moves in the league, I laud all the time. Not flippant, thoughtless, ballsy moves. I'm talking about two guys. John Lynch, tough ass, knows his football players. Kyle Shanahan, a tough guy, knows his system. It's not easy to play for Kyle Shanahan in a quarterback role because his expectations. Yes, he can. The quarterbacks can thrive, but it's short-lived in the sense of you better keep up with it or you're not going to be around for long because the expectations are so high. Julio Jones, just to parallel that, look, I had people in my ears, people lauding, and other people, as I said many times, think you're a dumbass for making moves and you're tying a career to one football player. What are you thinking? If you have that much conviction about it, you're going to do it. And I will never turn my eye on or turn my head on someone who hasn't done that, because you have to do that in this league. You can't be the conservative Nelly sitting on your hands. I like what they do there. I like their moves there. Leave it at this. That said, there is a lot of stress on what they're going to do with this. And when is the right time to do it, Eric? Again, as adept team builders, the two of them, head coach and GM, when do they trade? When don't they? Because if Brock Purdy steps up and he recovers from what he had, his injury, and he continues to sort of mess the minds up of the D coordinators out there who are really good. And I mentioned this to you, second year ins, never an easy thing. These guys have been studying him for a whole year. We'll be interested to see how that quarterback situation plays out.
Yeah, for sure. I once, Brad Childress wasn't perfect in Minnesota, but one thing I really appreciated about him was he said, I'm in my mid 50s. I'm going to do it my way because I only have one shot at this. And I think that your sentiment is true there. And that you only really get, look, like there aren't that many general managers that get more than one opportunity. And so taking big swings at it is probably the way to go out, right? Because, in the case of your career, for example, it got you to the Super Bowl. There's enough, and I think a lot of guys who kind of play it. You look in New York with the Jets, like, they took a swing on Zach Wilson, and really the thing that's keeping them excited coming off a 6-game losing streak at the end of the year is taking a big swing on Aaron Rodgers. And if it works, great. You got lifetime appointments there. If you don't, then but if you wanted to take that shot in the first place.
the key word there, and you added, I don't know if you did, if it was just out of your control, you said go out. And I don't ever, when there are people making those big moves, they don't think they're going out. They think they're going for it, right? They're not making that move saying, hey, well, it's my last move and I'm going to do it, I'm out. And I know you didn't add that for any other reason. That is a big thing. I think the confident guys out there and the confident men who are going to build with aggressiveness believe in all of those moves until they're proven wrong, of course. And I think that's a quality that you have to have in the NFL to be right, to be good, to be a champion.